dias, Gunners Collective. Back at it, you already know. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Remix. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Like a motherfucking smack addict, man. We back at it. You already feel me and you heard me? This is how we're coming today. As you can tell by that thumbnail, we're going to talk about a little something different. A little something strange for a little tiny piece of change. We're going to talk about the Pinoy Surenos. Oh, yes, indeedy. Exclusive on Gunners Collective. You heard it here first. I'm just kidding. Filipinos. You know, first and foremost, without too much being said, man, in a menudo style, in a direct fashion, I will say, coming from the Gunners Collective, man, my utmost respect. I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of Filipinos in my lifetime. I have some familia that are Filipinos. You know, they're just really about that shit. And that's what the word Pinoy means. Filipinos, people of Filipino descent. And I got a lot of respect for these people. These people, just like the Usos, are very humbled, very diligent in what they do, very respectful. But sabes que? Stop. Machete time. They will handle their business at any point in time. You know what I mean? Y'all have motherfuckers going, Blackbird, you feel me? Rest in peace. Real talk, man. These people ain't playing. And they play an intricate part into Sureñoism, as well as Norteñoism. Okay, there's Norteño, Filipino Norteños as well. But the majority, and for the most part, vatos that I've ran into extensively doing time in California, has been Pinoy Sureños, right? And they've been around for a long time. They play an intricate part into the Historia of Chicanos, period. You know, all the way back to Cesar Chavez when they were doing their strikes. And of course, the Filipino people were rocking right alongside of the Mexicanos and the Chicanos in that push, in that movement, you know, for the huelga. The huelga strikes, they were part of that. You know, a lot of people don't know that history. They don't know that the Filipino people were also, just like the Mexicanos out in them fields, struggling and striving and toiling in that soil for their daily bread, right? So they marched alongside of the Mexicanos and the Chicanos in them huelga strikes, man, for reform, for Famero reform, right? So these people have been around and they've been like this with Mexicanos from day one. But there's barrios, and a lot of people don't know that there's barrios in LA and around the world, of Pinoys that actually claim the Sur. They actually claim raza. Now you got to understand, coming from the Philippines, Filipino people, they do speak a different dialect of Spanish, but it's Spanish, period, and that's what it is. You know, so they're always the type of people, and I've worked with a few of them. You can have a full-blown conversation in Spanish with a Pinoy vato, with a Filipino. Like I said, a slight different dialect, but they're the best of both worlds. They look like Chinos, but they act like straight Mexicanos. So you never know if they're going to eat carne asada or fucking fried rice. Best of both worlds, they're winning. Bondegas, orange flavored chicken, and the winner is. But I got a lot of respect for these people. And what people don't understand is there's a lot of barrios in LA that were actually Pinoy based, meaning that it was just strictly Pinoys, right? Of course, they had some Africanos, some Gavas, and of course, a lot of Chicanos involved. But for the most part, they were Pinoy gangs that claimed the Sur. They were Surenos, right? Or Southsiders, excuse me. And one of those is, as you can tell by that thumbnail, Temple Street. Now, I ran into vatos from Temple Street while incarcerated. You know, doing time in Susanville, there was a couple vatos, Pinoy vatos from Temple Street. And I remember these vatos very clearly because they stood out to me as being looking Asian. I knew they quite weren't Asian. But there was to what degree of a twist there was, I couldn't call it like an alcoholic, but I knew at the same time, in the meantime, in between time, they were different, okay? But what I can say is they were about their business. You know, they carried themselves just like any other Sureño that was on that yard functioning, getting his burpees on and his push-ups. Oh my, they were doing their thing. And I respect that. You know, they were functioning, they were active, and they functioned. And they were pinta bound, of course. They were doing their thing. But this barrio, Temple Street, it's not a Johnny come lately. It's not something someone stumbled upon. It's like, hey, Sasuke, watch out, look it. No, these guys have been around since the 20s, 30s, or so on and so forth. Okay, and this barrio is not just in LA anymore. They've branched out. They're established in all the Western states throughout the world. You know how Sureños move, man. They plant their flags wherever they go. Sasuke, if you go to Wonka Land, okay, where Willy Wonka is posted up right now with the hat, oompa, loompa, guarantee there's Sureños right there. Post it up. Barrios is stat 18 right there. Say, what's up? This is Oompa Loompa land, Charlie, homie. This is 18th Street land. They're there. They're everywhere. Okay, and it's respects because they're able to establish wherever they go. You know, they're already in Northern California, so that's a given. You know what I mean? They did that. But the Pinoy Sureños are very well known in the LA area. Like I said, Filipinos have always rocked side by side with Mexicanos. And see, that's where people get the game twisted. They think just because you're a Norteño or a Sureño, you have to be raza. You have to be of Chicano descent, El Salvadorian, Latino, Guatemalteco, a Vato from Honduras. Chale, it's not like that, man. If you're worthy of the cause, if you're worthy of the canalismo and the embracement, and you're a real one, and you grew up in the barrio, you know, it's not your fault. So that's good. Your parents were from Oklahoma, then they moved to LA, and that's good. You grow, you're a white boy with green eyes, and now they call you güero. That's just how it is. It's how you conduct yourself, how you carry yourself, and how you demand the respect, and how you treat others is the character of a man, and how you're going to be judged as a man. But Sasuke, nobody could judge me, only God himself. But Sasuke, guess what? There's a big old Sureño and a big ass Norteño. They're going to judge you. Oh, they're going to judge you, right? So you better conduct yourself honorably, you know, admirably. Or the word of the day, admirably. Anyway, so running into some of these Pinoy gangsters, these Sureños, I remember the first conversation I had with one of them was actually on the calles. I was working at a place called the Dole Factory in Atwater. And for those of you that are from the Central Valley, the 209 area, don't get it twisted, Merced County, then you know the Dole Factory in Atwater is where everybody works, north and south. And there was some unwritten rules there because there was a lot of Sureños, because Atwater is a predominantly Sureño town. And there was a lot of Norteños from Livas, Merced, you want to surround it. You know what I mean? But everybody worked there, and there was kind of an unwritten rule there that while you were at work, nobody was to make any move on anyone. Now, it wasn't written in stone, so I was scared. No one's seen it or heard of it, but it was kind of like a given. Everyone was there to try to get feria for your familia, so it was off limits gang banging at work. But so I was scared that parking lot got funky, like a monkey sometimes, right? So I was scared. I seen vatos just wait. As soon as their ride would come, they jump in the car and dip out because they didn't want that funk. Because if you hang out in the parking lot too long, guarantee shit was going to get spunky, like Mozzie says, right? Oh, yes, immediately. But what happens was one day I was chilling and my ride was late. You know what I mean? My ride was late. So the air was blowing and I was right there with a big old piece. To where I had that piece secured, I won't tell you. But let's just say I had a piece. Here's my jacket. And I'm chilling. And I'm keeping, you know, awareness of my surroundings because there's a lot of gang members going back and forth, but no one's paying attention to me. You kind of be accustomed to where you're working and who is who and what's what, and no one's tripping, man. To be honest with you, everyone just wants to go home, drink a beer, and hopefully their old lady is done with Sancho so they can get theirs, period. But I'm chilling and there was actually a Filipino, and he had a big old 13 right here on his face, a 13 for those of you that don't know, and we got to conversating and chopping it up. And we were laughing and we were having a good old time. And he was telling me about his people. And he was actually from an older clica, an older gang in LA called Santana. Okay, he was from Santana. And he told me the history of Santana was that back in the days, there was a clica period that was predominantly Pinoys. They were all Filipinos. And of course, they gravitated towards the Mexicanos in the Sur. And eventually, man, they broke off and formed their own thing. And then he told me, you know, the enemigos they used to not get along with and who they used to get along with. And you know, I kind of asked him, I started to pick his mentality. That's the type of person I am. I wanted to know the history. You know, I wanted to know how the Filipinos gravitated more towards the Mexicanos rather than just their own. And he said, no, don't get it twisted. You know, there is a lot of Filipino-based gangs that are just Filipinos. They roll with the other car. They're about their gente. They're about their race. They're about their people first and foremost. But there are a lot that grew up in East LA, South Central, Los, West Los, Nela, Sela, Harbor area. Stand up, you know what I mean? Represent. They and they got love for the Sureños. Spencer, man, got something in my eye. Can't call it like an alcoholic. It itches. Anyways, they have they had a lot of love. So growing up around Mexicanos and seeing that cholo estilo and being able to talk Spanish, being able to communicate with the Chicanos there, that pool was there. So I was getting bang, bang. You already know what it was. They started to rock the Cortezes, the Benzo Mai, get a little pelon, and that's get los. They're in, right? Sureño style. And growing up in these neighborhoods, a lot of these other neighborhoods that were beefing with the neighborhood that they grew up in would take it out on them as well. What I said was a form of oppression by the Sureños, chale, because they were actually embraced and embraced people. But other barrios tripped on them just because they lived in that neighborhood. So sabes que they decided for no other reason to pick up arms and defend the neighborhood from which they lived. See, that's the type of people they are. A very humbled and respectful people, but will stand their ground. bang, bang. And those are the type of people I admire. Those are the type of people that I look at and I say, man, nothing but a form of respect like no other, because people that are not really in the mix, but will stand their ground for the hand. That's why, like, with what's going on with Russia and the Ukraine right now, I'm getting off base, but what's going on with Russia and the Ukraine right now, I got to give nothing but respect to the Ukrainian people because they're standing their ground. So I was scared. They're standing their ground for their home. They're not in the mix. A lot of these people are school teachers. You know what I mean? Johnny come latelys. They just ain't in the mix. J-Cats. But they're picking up arms to defend their country, to defend their fucking block. And that's what it's all about. Now, Filipinos. So after chopping up with this guy, he actually became a good friend. You know, he worked in a different department. I worked in the juice plant. He actually worked up front packing boxes. But we would meet up every once in a while for lunch and smoke a couple frajos and just chop it up, you know. And I remember some of the Surenos would look at him because he had this stress, but he was an older vato that was way up out the mix, okay? Not what you would consider a DO or a dropout or a non-active, just a vato that was part of his life back 30 years ago, and he decided, if for no other reason, to move up to Northern California and raise his kids, right? So they didn't trip too bad. And like I said, most of them chopped it up with me anyway, so it was all good in the hood. And vice versa, Norteños, Sureños, they were all kicking it, having juntas and enjoying fucking tortillas together. So, you want a tortilla? Who touched it? You know what I mean? Did Jaime touch it? Charlie, Sleepy did. All right, we're Sleepy from A-Town. Fuck it, man. I got a primo from A-Town. Shoot it, right? This is how it was. Back and forth. But he told me a lot of the history to the Pinoy Sureños being from LA. Now, I can't call it like an alcoholic if there's some from San Diego, if there's some from the Valle, different areas. All I know about are the ones from Los, Temple, Sri Santana, and a couple other barrios that are well established. Okay? Now, going into prison, fast forward and going into prison, like I said, there was a couple on the Yarda in Susanville, and I seen them from a distance, and I say they carried themselves with the utmost respect. There was never a problem. One of those vatos was actually in my building, but was on the other side of the block. And I would see him when he went to showers or walking around, you know, so I was at my window on post, like, bang, ready for whatever. If the fucking doors pop, let that be the reason, right? It was the season of the fucking season of the sickness. Orderly, Brother Lynch. But that never happened. And of course, man, Vato would just go out there with the ropa and boom, boom, do his thing. And he carried himself. And I don't want to sit here and be biased and say he carried himself like a Chicano. But me being Chicano and used to our ways, the Choloism and the way that Sureños and Norteños carry themselves, which is not too different, this is how them Vatos carry themselves. Okay, so now I take it back, like I said, back to the Cesar Chavez days, and the Mexicanos and the Filipinos worked side by side with each other, okay? And they had a lot of the same shortcomings and a lot of the same struggles, right? Meaning that because they weren't of a different descent, right? That's what I'll just say, you know, it's like, yeah, YouTube, you know, you already know YouTube. They were oppressed, okay? They were not treated the same as the average worker. They weren't given the allotted time breaks like they should be. They were not given the wages, the same wages that regular motherfuckers, I guess you can call them, would get, right? So that struggle was there, man. So they decided to band with the Chicanos to do that. And I know I've spoken on it, and I'm going to say it again. The huelga strikes were not just for the benefit of the Chicano and the Mexicano people, but also for the betterment of the Filipino people as well. A lot of people don't know that historia. Okay, so let's fast forward again. Bang, bang. I'm actually living in a town called Livas. Orale, Livingston. We're going to get into a spill later on this week about Livas in A-Town. Bang, bang. But I'm living in Livas, and I run into a couple Sureños that are Filipino, of Filipino descent. And I remember the vatos not necessarily being from Livas. They were from a different town. Because quietly as it's kept, and for anyone that knows, man, there is no other established barrios in the city of Livingston other than Livas Norte. That's just the way it's always been. We're going to get into that later on in the week, man. That's a whole different animal. But very well respected. Shout out to Livas, you know what I mean, 209. But these vatos were there, and I remember running into them at a little store. There's a Rite Aid there right in the middle of town, and I was actually in the Rite Aid. So I was getting my old lady at the time. She was in there grabbing whatever she had to grab, and I was posted up waiting. And I was trying to look out for my own well-being. So that's good, you know what I mean? Because they were active in their function over there. So I'm posted up like a thumbtack, and these vatos come through, and I mean, they're Sureño down. And when I say Sureño down, bald, panel tints, like the only first three buttons, bing, da, da, you know what I mean? I seen arms, like they're floating, but those were about their business. Anyways, they come in, and they immediately look me up and down. I remember that day I was wearing a black Raiders hat, homie, and a black Raider shirt. That's getting not red. You know what I mean? Because they probably would have let some off in my head. But so they looked at me. They're like, "You a homie?" And automatically, I already knew, bro. And for those of you that say, "Oh no, how did you?" I knew these were Surenos. You could tell, right? So I think the X3, real big on his hand, is what alerted me up, you know, in the beginning. But anyways, I was like, Charlie, I was like, but look, this is a Norteño town. They were like, oh, we know, bro. We're just visiting familia. We ain't tripping, bro. If we see any vatos, we're gonna get off. You know what I mean? We're just making sure. And I said, nah, look, bro. I'm gonna be totally honest with you, bro. This is not the type of town you want to be in, looking the way you look, right? And I'm not disrespectful. Them are some clean ass Cortezes, right? I used to have those, right? But and then we chopped it up for a few minutes. And again, they told me they were Pinoy. And they also were from this barrio right here, Temple Street, which is a trick. Because when I came across this, I said, oh, I got to use that as my thumbnail. Because I remember that hood. And of course, I'm sure I did time in YA with a couple. There was a couple Asians that were of a more darker skinned men that looked like they could be either Laos or Filipino. And they probably were Filipinos. But at the same time, they were from the Sur. And we were straight enemigas and getting with the business and the program at that time. So we didn't chop it up as much as we probably should have or would have nowadays. But I got a lot of respect for them. I did time with the other car, okay? And there was a lot of Filipino people in the other car, okay? Now you have the other car in prison, which consists of Pacific Islanders, Asians, and people that go in maybe as Crips, Bloods, Sureños, Norteños, and not necessarily Sureños and Norteños. They pretty much stick to the gang, you know, their gang ties first and foremost. But vatos that are like Crips and Bloods and just others gravitate towards each other and kind of hold it down in what is known as the other car. And there's a lot of Filipinos. And I had the privilege to chop it up with a lot of the Filipinos because they sat on our side of the day room, function on our side of the yard, function on our bars. So we would chop it up, you know. They were able to wiggle, but for the most part, they stood on this side because they already knew what time it was. If shit would go down, there was not I would say an alliance, but with some of the vatos, because we were so cool with them, there was a light, loose alliance on an individual basis. We'll just put it like that. And man, these vatos were cool people. A little different type of food, like I said, different type of dialect, but some of the greatest people I ever came across in my life, just on the way they carry themselves and just how funny these individuals were. Now, I'm not going to say their whole people are funny people, but I'm saying that these guys had good charisma and good humor and attitudes to themselves, you know, and for that is, to me, a reflection of their people. You know, I can only go judge based on people that I've met, and everyone that I've ever met of a Filipino descent, whether they be Filipino Sureños or Norteños, because there was a couple, we're going to get right down to that. It's respect. Now, of course, there was a homeboy from Merced. He's actually from a well-known barrio Merced, an old school one, right? M14ers, VMR, Barrio Merced Rifa. And he was a Filipino descent. And everybody knew this, and everyone respected him, and a lot of people thought that he was actually a Mexicano, but he wasn't. He was just dark, so kid with slanted eyes like that, and he was ready to woo Bruce Lee your shit if you wanted that funk. A lot of respect, like I said, an OG. He used to run and function real close with the vato named Local Man, Johnny Rivera, man. My boy, you know what I mean? You already know what it is. The struggle's still real. These two were real taitas, man. They used to roll, and everyone ever said knew. And I remember I used to say, hey, why'd you join the Norte, bro? Being Filipino, you could have went with the other car with your own people. And he used to say, ¿sabes qué? We are a raza. We consider ourselves raza. And that always stuck with me when he said that, you know? But over the years, I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of Filipino people, and it's nothing but respect. I've met Filipino bulldogs, orale Sharky. You know what I mean? For those of you that don't know, OG Sharky. I've met Filipino Sureños. Like I said, that's what this is predominantly about. The Filipino Sureños who've been well established. And I will tell you this, it's not like I said they established in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Chile. These vatos have been around since the 20s and 30s. So they've been there before Sureñoism, before there were Sureño soldados. Back when it was just barrios, they were already established. And they gravitated into that. Now, as far as what's going out in Los, and the politics that are playing with the Pinoys and stuff, that's their business. I'm not involved in that, so I can't sit here and tell you. But at the end of the day, I will tell you that, yes, it's true. It's facts, man. There are some barrios out there of pure, straight up Filipinos that are down with the Sur and the Norte as well. Is there any Pinoy, solid Pinoy-based group, Norteño barrios? I can't call it like an alcoholic, not right off the dome. But so I ain't from everywhere, so you never know, you know, does one. Anyways, I hope that you move fast with a purpose. Hope that you get everything that you want coming to you. Remember, at the end of the day, it's all about going out there and struggling, whether you're a raza, Filipino, Africano, or white. Oh my, it doesn't matter, man. North, South, Bulldogs, everyone can get it. You know, you guys all got love and respect for each other. You're all going to get that back to you. Bang, bang. Anyways, the gun. Like and subscribe if you like this. If you don't, you can hit that thumbs down, heavy as the head that wears that crown. You know what it is. The gun. And I'm going to proceed as such, man. Shout out and respects to the Filipino people. Stand up.